Hello and welcome. Today, private investor Mark Atkinson will be reviewing his stock holding in Smurfit Kappa, ticker symbol SKG. And I'm also pleased to announce that our podcast is now generously hosted by City of London firm Progressive Equity Research. Mark will be talking more about that too later in this, episode 10 of The Desert Island Investor.
Hi Paul, well, what have you got there then?
I did a bit of a walk along the beach earlier this morning and found a couple of FedEx packages that had washed up, and I just thought I'd open them up and see what was inside.
Any practical use?
Absolutely none whatsoever. In this one, there's just a couple of jars of homemade salsa, and I don't particularly like that spicy food anyway. But the main thing was that I was just surprised how well the boxes stood up to being in the sea, and seeing that's something we're talking about today, isn't it? Cardboard, because you're doing Smurfit Kappa Group. So you're retired now, but prior to this you worked exclusively in the paper industry and latterly in the related wider packaging industry.
Yes, Paul, that's right. Picture, if you will, Fenny Skulls, Blackburn, 1984, and a young athletic man with a full head of hair and apple cheeks, full of innocence and enthusiasm, starts his first day in the sales department of Star Paper Limited on the princely sum of £6,000 a year. I studied paper and the industry additionally at night school. That was lots of fun, and passed the National Association of Paper Merchants interim and final certificate with credit. And fast forward, I eventually became a member of the Lancashire Paper Trade 25 Club. That's for people within Lancashire who've worked in the industry for 25 years, and I'm allowed to wear the coveted club tie. And over my career, I've worked at various times for both paper mills and merchants.
Yes, I've seen that tie. So you know a little bit about paper. Thanks very much for the CV.
Yeah.
So moving swiftly on, what are the base numbers for Smurfit Kappa?
Yes, it's got a market capitalisation of 8.4 billion, a PE of 8.3, and a yield of 3.7%, and that's based on the current share price of £32.46.
When were they first listed, and when did you invest?
They were jointly listed on the Irish and London stock exchanges in 2007, and that was a couple of years following the merger between Irish Jefferson Smurfit and Dutch Kappa Packaging. And Smurfit originally dates back to 1934. Now, I first invested in April 2016 at £19.14, then again in June 2019 at £21.75, November 2019 at £27.04, April 2020 at £22.11, and November 22 was my last edition at £29.04. Now, at the time of the float, the business was valued at 1.5 billion euros, which is approximately 1.3 billion sterling, and it's now valued at 8.4 billion, as we've just mentioned. So you could argue that this has been good progress.
So they've just released interim figures. Any surprising things in that?
Not particularly. As expected, I think. Revenue was down 9% and EBITDA down 5%, with box volumes down 6%, which I think reflects a tighter environment. Consumers aren't spending as much, and given the well-documented cost of living, I would suggest that this is nevertheless well within the long-term upward trend. Smurfit advised that they're continuing to gain market share, and this isn't just through lowering prices. And return on capital employed is 19%.
Right, well, what's the investment argument with Smurfit Kappa?
Well, with a business, it makes it easier if the business has got a tailwind. And with Smurfit, I would suggest that it's blessed with having two. Firstly, the rise in e-commerce and the increasing move away from plastic to paper-based packaging. I thought we covered both.
When you mentioned Smurfit Kappa, it didn't really strike me as an exciting area. I mean, we're all familiar with cardboard boxes. I mean, we see them every day. We have done for most of our lives.
Yeah, corrugated's been around a long time, Paul, since 1871, when it was patented by Albert Jones in New York City. And it's as though as a product, it's waited very patiently over a century for Tim Berners-Lee to subsequently invent the internet and online shopping to take off. So I think it's perhaps that corrugated packaging has been around so long as as an investment, perhaps it's been ignored. If it had been a product that just been come along in recent times, we'd probably see it as a wonder product. So you may have heard of Pitney Bowes, who are a US business, probably best known for their postage meters. Well, every year they produce a parcel shipping index, and they estimate that between 2022 and 2027, the global parcel volume will grow to 256 billion parcels by 2027. Now, that's a compound annual growth rate of 8.5%. Now, in the UK, we are very much at the front runners as online consumers. Per capita, we receive 80 parcels per year. Now, that's the highest in the 13 countries within the index. But the rest of the world is slowly but steadily following this established pattern. And, I would suggest it's not just predictable markets. In Morocco, Smurfit Kappa have just opened their first corrugated plant at a cost of 35 million euros to service industrial, agricultural, FMCG, pharmaceuticals and ceramics. And it's resulted in 400 new jobs, both directly and indirectly. Now, this market was previously serviced from Spain, but this new facility will have 1,500 solar panels, saving 55% on electricity and 900 tons of CO2. Lots of these emerging economies are coming along at pace, following the same path as developed economies and producing a consumer class. And it's easy to think that many countries being light years behind us, but just take a look at Morocco. It's got the Al Barak Railway and it's got developed skyscrapers and office blocks. And, it's not dissimilar to, the Western world, Paul. So I go to Mauritius and I visit the local supermarkets, and they're just as recognisable as they are in the UK. We've got trolleys, baskets, checkouts, aisles, air conditioning, tinny music, corrugated shelf-ready packaging, and corrugated point of supply sounds just like what we've got.
So we could describe SKG as a classic picks and shovels business?
Yeah, Jeff Bezos, he's made his fortune from Amazon. Of that Pitney Bowes estimate of 256 billion parcels, there'll be hundreds of thousands of different products, but a common denominator is that nearly all of them come encased in some form of paper-based packaging. There are many ways to play the move from bricks and mortar to online retail. I see retail itself as a race to the bottom. Often the product is not unique, so it's a case of who's going to work for the narrowest margin. And then if you look at couriers, Tufnells have recently gone into administration. All you need to be a courier is a man and a van, and you virtually have a business. For me, packaging is the better play. Now, for me, shopping is an activity I abhor. I'd much rather be doing something else with my time. If there is such a place as hell, it probably consists of a shopping centre. Now, we're both men of a certain age, Paul, and are you an advocate of online shopping, or are you, old school and prefer to driving into Bolton, paying to park your car, get wet, queue up, and be told that what you want isn't in stock?
Well, I still shop for essentials like alcohol on foot or by car. So I do food shopping, but I don't hardly ever go into the town centre now. It's nearly done at one of the satellite supermarkets where you don't have to pay for your parking. And I use Amazon as well, obviously, for things. I don't do online shopping. I don't get groceries online, but that I may well do in the future.
Well, just over the last couple of days, they mentioned that Wilko's are at the verge of administration. And I can only remember, I'm not saying I've only been in it once, so I can only remember going in a Wilko's once to buy a rice maker. That must have been about 10 years ago. And now I wouldn't even consider going in person to buy a product like that. That will be something that I get on the internet.
Back to Smurfit. Do they have a moat?
Yeah, well, I would say that part of their moat is that they've got a well-integrated offering, in that they've got forests, paper mills, corrugated conversion plants, and recycling facilities. Now, this gives them some control over continuity of supply. Then there's the scale. They've got 48,000 employees and 355 production sites spread across 36 countries. So not exposed to just, one country or just several. But one moat for corrugated is that it requires very regionalised production. A lot of the cost of the product being shipped consists of fresh air in packaging. So if you've got to transport it over a long distance, that's counterproductive. So it has to be manufactured and supplied close to the consumer.
So compared to a lot of other companies, I think it's fair to say that Smurfit had a good COVID.
Yes, for obvious reasons. People gravitated online shopping. This acted, as an accelerant for this transition. And in addition, Smurfit was deemed an essential business generally across the countries in which it operated. So it was largely unaffected by any lockdowns or furlough schemes.
What about the competition?
Yeah, there's plenty of competition. Smurfit is a FTSE 100 business, but so are two other companies in the same field, DS Smith and Mondi. But given the growth prospects, there appears room for all, and it's a case of a rising tide lifts all boats. Smurfit have previously said that have more opportunities than they can manage with. So, certain governments are banning or taxing certain types of plastic packaging. Plus, individual businesses are themselves independently moving to paper-based products from plastic. But it's too easy just to announce these moves at a stroke. The tonnage involved is enormous. And, there's not necessarily the capacity within the paper industry to accommodate all these requirements. Just wondering, Paul, any particular thoughts?
I've seen quite a few things that appear to be successful at first glance. I remember seeing quite a few bottles now that are made of paper pulp, which must have some kind of lining, I guess, to stop the liquid from seeping through. But they look quite unusual. So, the ones I saw, I think, had washing powder or detergent in them. And of course, there are lots of things like they can have the plastic rings that hold cans of beer together, can be replaced with cardboards now. It's very durable, very flexible. I did a quick look at Smurfit Kappa's range. I mean, they're obviously really big and do a lot of things. But one of the things that caught my eye was they actually make a cardboard tent. So if you're a camper, you can get the cardboard tent out. The idea, I think, is that they were made available at festivals, and so people have obviously seen the photographs of the thousands of tents that have been abandoned by festival goers. So they've decided that it'd be better to have cardboard tents that I guess could be recycled. And I have also seen a video of one chap on YouTube who actually went and bought one of these things and took it into the forest in England in the rain and did a review on it. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel in the notes. The channel's called Kent Survival. And I didn't actually watch it to the very end, so I'm not sure whether he just wound up with a big soggy lump of cardboard or whether it was actually manageable. But it comes in a very big packet. It's quite a substantial thing. It's not the sort of thing you can put under your arm if you're thinking of transporting it. But again, uses for cardboard increasing all the time.
Yeah, it's very flexible. I'd never thought of making a tent out of it, though. Now, there are arguments between paper and plastic industries as to which is the most environmentally friendly, and there's figures as to how much carbon's being produced in paper manufacturing. But rightly or wrongly, the direction of travel is with the paper industry at the moment.
So, with this increase in demand, how are Smurfit responding?
Well, paper businesses love big order books. Longer runs really help efficiency as there are less stoppages. There's nothing better than putting that machine in top gear and letting it cruise. This allows the opportunity to bottom trim, which is a euphemism for dropping business that is not as profitable. And, machines are becoming ever faster and wider and more efficient, but Smurfit are bringing on new capacity with new builds and also making acquisitions, as many as 37 since 2012. As an example, in 2021, Smurfit purchased a mill in Vezzuolo from Cartiereburgo, a company I worked for 10 years. And this cost 360 million euros and produced 600,000 tons of recycled containerboard. Now, interestingly, until 2019, this was manufacturing coated graphical papers, the type we use in magazines. As we're using less graphical paper for various reasons, many mills have been converted to packaging applications. Closer to home, there's another mill in Shotton in North Wales, which was previously manufacturing newsprint, and this has been adapted to containerboard. Now, that's not a Smurfit enterprise, but it's just another example of what's occurring.
Since you initially purchased, I believe that Smurfit received a takeover approach from International Paper, but this did not go through. Were you disappointed by that?
This was back in 2018, and the initial offer was for a combination of €22 cash and 0.3028 International Paper shares, which was a 27.4% premium. Now, this was later increased to €25 cash plus 0.3 International Paper shares, valuing the bid at €9.5 billion or 8.3 billion sterling. Now, today, International's share price is just over $36. But rather than being disappointed, I was relieved because, sometimes investors are ecstatic about receiving a takeover bid, but this can be a short-term sensation. If you've got a good business, which I believe Smurfit is, and obviously as International thought, if it's sold, then I have to find another home for that money, and that may end up being such a compelling investment. So I'm happy that Smurfit can show the return under its own steam.
I often hear of people investing for either growth or income, but you feel that Smurfit offers both?
Yes, as well investing for future growth. The dividend of 3.7% should not be ignored. And dividend growth has been good since I first invested. In 2016, the dividends totaled 79.6 euro cents, and in 2022 this has risen to €1.39. If you take a time frame since 2011, the compound annual growth rate for the dividend has been 22.5%, and €2.4 billion have been returned to shareholders over that period. In 2022, in the report, the dividends cover 2.6 times by earnings per share, so it doesn't look overly stretched. And in the recent webcast, they didn't rule out the prospect of share buybacks. So if you look at 2022, the return on capital employed was 21.8%, which I think would take a lot of people by surprise for what might at first appear a boring business.
I understand the stamp duty is higher with Smurfit.
Yeah, it's usually 0.5% for companies on the LSE and 0 on AIM shares. But with Smurfit, this is 1% by virtue that it's an Irish-listed company. Now, this doesn't overly trouble me as I'm a long-term investor. And hopefully that 1% I pay will be spread over the next, 10 or 20 years.
Even though you're not still in the industry, then, you feel your back history gives you an advantage with analysing this particular stock?
Yeah, I still have many ex-colleagues and customers who are personal friends that I converse with and I read trade magazines. So I think this gives me a good insight, which, I don't have to dig too deeply for.
Okay, Mark. Well, thank you very much indeed for discussing Smurfit. A little bit of news that I announced right at the very beginning was the fact that this episode is generously hosted by a company called Progressive Equity Research, and I believe you're going to tell us a little bit about that association.
Yeah, Paul, excellent news, very exciting news for us that, after just 9 episodes, when we started this, I don't think we knew exactly, where it was going to go, whether, it would have floundered after 2 or 3, but we've kept going and we've had lots of support, and really pleased that, Progressive Equity Research, which are a city firm that represent our clients are small and medium cap businesses, are putting their name alongside ours, and they will be hosting our podcast on their website. So hopefully, this will give us a wider audience and bring us into touch with more investors and more shareholders, and that's my currency, because that's more information and knowledge that I can utilize.
And the other good news about this, of course, is that we're now going to be broadcasting the podcast on more conventional podcasting channels like Spotify, in addition to our YouTube channel. So that's also good. It widens our audience a bit. Well, it widens the number of people that may or may not listen to the to the podcast.
Yeah,
we could just be widening the number of people that say I'm not remotely interested in that. But
this time next year, Paul, we're going to be on a desert island twice as big as this one. Believe me.
Yeah.
But
millionaires, Rodders.
Yeah,
millionaires.
Yeah. But I do think that it is an excellent fit for us. I do think that what we offer complements, particularly what Jeremy does on Jeremy McEwen on in the Company of Mavericks podcast, which is different to this. And one thing that was very important to us is that we retain creative independence, Paul. In that when we started off on this, one of the things we do want to do is to be true to ourselves, and just we don't want to compromise on that. And they were very supportive of that. Their actual words was that they didn't want to meddle or clip our wings in any way, was another phrase that they used. And not just for the content, but just the logistics of it. If we'd recorded an episode and edited it, and then we had to send it off for somebody else to eventually get around to listening to it and sign it off, that just wouldn't have worked at all. So I just think it's just terrific for us. And thanks for everything that you've done, Paul.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. I'll next time I'm on Amazon, I'll buy you something and have it sent to you in a cardboard box made by Smurfit.
Okay, mate.
Okay, so, next we straight into question in a bottle then. And let's see what's in the bottle today. Right, question from David Raywood. And David asks, what is EBITDA?
Right, well, thank you once again, David, for your excellent question and your ongoing support, which is appreciated. Now, EBITDA is a measure of a company's profitability, but only on the operating business before certain other factors are deducted. First and foremost, it's cards on the table, and I'm not an accountant, so I have but a lay understanding of accounts. And my view on accounts is a little like this. I've recently made an Arnold Bennett omelette, and jolly good it was too. It contains smoked haddock, cheese, garlic, milk, creme fraiche, and an assortment of other ingredients. Now, if you Google Arnold Bennett omelette, you will find numerous different recipes, all claiming to be an Arnold Bennett omelette. But they all taste slightly different, and I feel that accounts is a little like that. It's not like when we were at school and we learnt that 9 nines make 81, or the chemical symbol of gold is AU. It's not just a case of adding up all the numbers and there's one definitive result. I'm sure if you put 10 accountants in separate rooms, together with the numbers, what they will produce would all look slightly different. So I'll give my take on EBITDA. The easy bit is explaining that it's an acronym for earnings before, a key word missing there, deduction of interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. It's something that appears to be used more and more, and probably one of the main attractions is that it provides a company with a bigger, sometimes much bigger, and eye-catching number than just straight profit. So the degree to which EBITDA can skew the picture depends on the separate exposure the business has to those four main components, the ITDA: interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. On interest, if you have relatively high levels of debt, then this will naturally have a bearing on its relevance to this metric. And on tax, well, it's hoped that you are paying some tax, as this would suggest that the company in question is actually making a profit. Then we have depreciation, which is an item that can be played around with. When a company buys an asset, and they would refer to tangible assets, these are physical things that we can touch, its cost is not set immediately against the profit, but across what's deemed its useful life. And this is a guesstimate of how long it will last. And over successive years, what is considered its fair value will diminish. Now, there are two main forms of depreciation. straight line, where the asset depreciates by the same value each year over its useful life, which seems quite simplistic. And then double declining, where an asset loses more value in its early years and then more slowly after that. Think about driving a brand new shiny car out of a showroom. So if you lay those two methods over one another on a graph, they will look quite different. So you can choose the method of depreciation, and then management has the flexibility to make a judgment on what the useful life of an asset is. If an asset is given a useful life of, say, 10 years, it's highly unlikely in 10 years' time, when the clock chimes midnight, that it will coincide with that asset needing replacing. It could last shorter, or it could last longer. Management also have to assess whether at the end of the useful life the asset is likely to have some residual value. An asset may sit on the books at zero but still have some residual value, even if it's just for spare parts or scrap. And management also have the ability to revise the useful life of assets. This might be for totally justifiable reasons, or there again you have to remember that directors are only temporary custodians of a business, and it's possible that decisions are made in the expedient short term, that if there's some blowback in the future, somebody else will be sitting in the hot seat whilst they're winning in Acapulco. So perhaps the argument is that because depreciation can be a little bit nebulous, then that's a reason EBITDA is better, as it strips it away. Well, I'd say no. It might not be a perfect science, but it's better than not making an attempt. Then lastly, we have amortization, which is similar to depreciation, but it involves intangible assets, things that we cannot touch. Amortization, as I understand, is calculated slowly on a straight line basis and would apply to things like trademarks, licenses, or franchises. These are things that expire, and the only element is time. Unlike tangibles, there's no attrition, there's no wear and tear, and there's no residual value. So if you have an asset-light business, say a software or recruitment business with little or no borrowings, then you may see little difference with EBITDA. However, if you had a business with lots of assets and some debt thrown in, then the picture could look somewhat different. And as an example, a convenient example, we need not look no further than the company that we've discussed this episode, which is Smurfit Kappa. Now, the 2022 annual report consisted of 236 pages. Straight away on page 2, bang, we have the revenue. 12.815 billion euros and EBITDA of 2.355 billion euros. That looks pretty good. And an EBITDA margin of 18.4%. Now, papermaking and conversion is an asset-intense industry with lots of attrition, perpetual use, and lots of moving parts across pulp preparation, paper machines, rewinders, slitters, cutters, guillotines, folders, and other converting processes. So, as you would expect, Smurfit have lots of assets. Their property, plant and equipment totals 4.631 billion euros. And thrown in, they have 2.672 billion euros of goodwill and intangible assets. They also have borrowings of 3.78 billion and net debt of 2.992 billion euros. So, if we dig a little further into the report, let's go beyond page 2, into the guts of the report, as far as page 176, we obtain some more useful information. There are financial costs of 184 million euros. There's also some financial income of 35 million, making a net 149 million euros. Income tax expense is 348 million euros. And depreciation and depletion, if we think about all those hard-working assets, is 579 million euros. Lastly, amortization is 49 million euros. So I'm sure you'll agree these are not insignificant numbers. There are also some peripherals listed, impairment of goodwill and non-current assets, unallocated centre costs, and share-based payment expenses. So after stripping all these away from the EBITDA figure of 2.355 billion, we're left with profit for the year of 945 million, which is a much different number. So with EBITDA, we need to read beyond those initial pages into the report and dig a little bit deeper in order that we've got more of a rounded understanding of the business.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you would like to pop a question into a bottle for Mark, just post your question in the comments and hopefully it'll reach the island in time for the next episode. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.